Ask yourself this: did video games begin with home consoles and cartridges, or with a handful of scientists tinkering late at night? The common myth says the industry sprang fully formed from arcade cabinets and console launches. The truth is messier and more human. In this chapter, we trace the origin story to lab benches, university dorm rooms, and the stubborn inventors who refused to treat play as trivial. The first sparks came from scientists like William Higginbotham and Ralph Baer. Higginbotham created Tennis for Two in 1958 AD, a two-player analog game shown on an oscilloscope meant to entertain visitors at a research lab open day. A few years later, Ralph Baer designed the Brown Box in the mid-1960s AD, a prototype that became the Magnavox Odyssey. Meanwhile, a graduate at MIT named Steve Russell and his collaborators built Space War in 1962 AD, the first widely shared digital game on mainframe computers. These were not entrepreneurs chasing profit. They were engineers proving an idea: interactive screens could be meaningful, social, and emotionally powerful. That simple shift, treating play as technology, seeded everything that would follow.
The 1970s AD are where invention collided with commerce. This chapter covers how prototypes became product and how misplaced assumptions created a wild new market. Ralph Baer licensed the Brown Box concept to Magnavox, which launched the Odyssey in 1972 AD, the first home video game console. Almost simultaneously, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney formed Atari and released Pong as an arcade cabinet in 1972 AD, turning a simple table tennis game into a cultural phenomenon. Pong's success revealed a crucial lesson: people would spend money to play. Arcades multiplied, and entrepreneurs rushed to clone or iterate on hits. This rapid growth created both opportunity and chaos. Hardware makers, coin-op distributors, and new studios sprang up almost overnight. The early industry was primitive technically, but it was innovative in business, exploring pay-per-play economics, location-based entertainment, and licensing deals. Yet this headlong rush also sowed seeds of volatility. Low barriers to entry meant flooded markets, and consumer expectations were still forming. For the first time, entertainment economics met interactive technology, and the lessons learned in this era would shape strategies for decades.
The early 1980s AD tell an oddly human story of boom, overconfidence, and a very public collapse. By 1983 AD, the market was glutted with poorly designed games, cheap hardware, and confusing branding. Customers were frustrated, retailers were burned, and consumers lost faith. The result was the North American video game crash of 1983 AD, a severe contraction that toppled companies and made investors wary. This chapter explains how creative missteps became strategic disaster. Too many licensed tie-ins, rushed cartridges, and conflicting standards created a retail nightmare. Atari, once dominant, struggled under poor management decisions and an inability to guarantee quality. But crashes are rarely the end of a story. They force reinvention. Enter Nintendo and the Japanese studio system, which had been quietly refining game design and production practices. Nintendo's Famicom launched in 1983 AD in Japan, and the company later repositioned the system as the Nintendo Entertainment System for North America in 1985 AD, with strict quality control, creative first-party titles, and new retail strategies. The crash cleared out the chaos and set the stage for more disciplined growth.
If the crash taught the industry discipline, the late 1980s AD taught it artistry. Nintendo became a design-first company with characters, worlds, and systems that felt timeless. Shigeru Miyamoto emerged as the era's defining creative force, designing Donkey Kong and creating Mario, a character who would become gaming's mascot and a storyteller's tool. The Nintendo Entertainment System dominated North America after 1985 AD, stabilizing retail and proving that quality and branding mattered. This was the golden age for 2D platformers, tight game mechanics, and iconic sound design. Simultaneously, the home console landscape diversified. Sega entered the market aggressively with the Sega Genesis in 1989 AD, pushing a faster, flashier identity and sparking the first major console wars. Developers experimented with narrative, difficulty curves, and secret levels. These years show how art and engineering blended. Constrained hardware forced creative solutions. The lessons were simple: memorable characters sell consoles, and gameplay depth builds franchises. Business strategies shifted from churning cartridges to investing in first-party studios and long-term IP.
The mid-1990s AD rewired expectations. Three-dimensional graphics, CD media, and more powerful processors let designers build worlds instead of stages. Sony entered as a major console player with the PlayStation in 1994 AD, leveraging affordable CDs and a developer-friendly approach to attract creators. Nintendo answered with the Nintendo 64 in 1996 AD, which pushed polygonal gameplay and introduced analog control with the analog stick. Meanwhile, the personal computer evolved from a hobbyist platform into a powerhouse for simulation, strategy, and first-person shooters. Titles like Doom and Quake pushed multiplayer over local networks and set the template for competitive PC gaming. This era saw a split. Consoles excelled at shared living room experiences and cinematic titles, while PCs became the home of moddable, community-driven games and complex simulations. From a business perspective, the industry matured. Bigger budgets, longer development cycles, and more global distribution. The stakes rose. Companies needed hits to justify investments, and the first true blockbusters emerged. This was the moment video games stopped being niche and became mainstream culture.
The turn of the century reinvented how games connected people and created revenue. Internet connectivity shifted games from solitary experiences to persistent social worlds. EverQuest and early MMORPGs in 1999 AD proved millions would invest time and money into shared virtual spaces. The 2000 AD decade saw consoles adopt online features, and PC distribution moved digital with platforms like Steam in 2003 AD, transforming how games were sold and updated. Mobile gaming emerged as a democratic force after the iPhone in 2007 AD and the App Store in 2008 AD, putting games in billions of pockets. Simple hits like Snake on feature phones prefigured a mobile economy based on short sessions, in-app purchases, and broad accessibility. This digital shift also created new monetization models, downloadable content, microtransactions, free-to-play, and live service games that could be updated indefinitely. The result was a more fragmented but more resilient industry, where indie creators could thrive alongside multinational publishers. Esports and streaming transformed play into spectator entertainment. Sites like Twitch in 2011 AD turned players into personalities. The business of games diversified, and the audience expanded globally.
The 2010 AD era is defined by creators reclaiming control and by technology lowering the barriers to entry. Digital storefronts and powerful game engines allowed independent developers to tell personal, experimental stories without huge budgets. Games like Braid, Minecraft, and Celeste proved small teams could make cultural hits and influence mainstream design. At the same time, virtual reality returned from a long dormancy. Oculus Rift's breakthrough Kickstarter in 2012 AD reignited interest, and major companies invested in immersive hardware. The indie renaissance forced traditional publishers to rethink risk and to acquire or partner with nimble studios. Crowdfunding, early access programs, and social communities became part of the funding and feedback loop. This chapter focuses on the human stories. Designers leaving secure jobs to bet on creative freedom, communities turning mod projects into companies, and players supporting experiments through direct purchase or donations. For the industry, the lesson is clear. Lowering technical and distribution barriers democratizes innovation, and surprising commercial success can come from authenticity rather than marketing budgets. After 7 decades of evolution, the history of video games reads like a study in human creativity meeting commercial pressure. We began with lab prototypes in the 1950s and 1960s AD, moved through arcades and crashes, and then into global platforms that connect billions. What remains constant are people, inventors, struggling studios, brilliant designers, and passionate players shaping what comes next. The industry's greatest strength is its ability to reinvent distribution, technology, and business models while preserving play as the core value. But that agility has trade-offs: consolidation among a few mega publishers, debates about monetization, and ongoing challenges around labor practices and sustainability. The closing lesson is simple: treat games as cultural technology, invest in creators, respect players as communities, and design with both craft and responsibility. If developers and business leaders remember that play can be meaningful, the next chapter will blend immersive technology, broader access, and deeper storytelling. That's where the future lives, at the intersection of imagination and infrastructure. I hope this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the strategies and the relentless mindset behind these global icons. If you enjoy deconstructing business empires and tech legends in this Tech Archive style, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. That way, you will never miss a new blueprint of history. For those of you ready to explore more boardroom coups and technological breakthroughs, I have handpicked 2 videos for you right here on the screen. Click one to keep watching. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.